Hey Pat, how you doing?
Good, Dave. We've communicated so many times, but
Hmm.
never face to face.
Never face to face, but you're always a good resource for information. And I was chatting online about some proposed possible damage to concrete, and you said you might have some points of view to give me on that.
You've been in the property claims damage assessment business for a while, same as I. And there are
Yeah.
no absolutes. There are no absolutes. You could have five houses exactly the same or five factories lined up, and they're all going to react to a damage differently. The piece that you showed was concrete damage from large hailstones. And there was some skepticism for a
Exactly.
concrete driveway. Flat driveway, it's the termination point of large objects falling from the sky.
Right.
So, what concrete is it? Is it 5,000 psi? Is it 50 years old? Is
It's
it,
um it's about 2 years old.
yeah, it doesn't matter because is it too much calcium when they poured it in the Northeast? Did they make the mix wrong? There's just so many variables.
So you're saying that you could have two things side by side, but have formulated it differently and it react differently during the same to the same impact.
What if it was spalling and it hadn't flaked off yet? And the hailstones came down, it could have just taken the surface off. Large items hitting small items, and nothing's less compressible than water,
Right.
frozen or liquid. Of course, you can get damage to a concrete surface from hailstones if they're proper sized. I
Yeah.
don't know why there's even a debate.
On this particular one, the thing that was interesting to me about it
Uh huh.
was they had four cars in the driveway,
Uh huh.
and underneath the driveway, underneath those cars, no such damage, but around those cars there was pretty consistent
And
damage.
the cars had damage, and there was
Well, yeah,
other
they
collateral damage.
yeah they had, I mean, it was strong enough to break windshields. If
Right.
that gives you a
So you
notion.
had like a fire, you had shadowing underneath the vehicles.
Right.
Same idea. I'm intrigued that there
So,
would be
so
pushback.
no, I mean, it intrigued me because, like, I'm just being honest with you. When I looked at it, I thought, I can't go for this. And then I looked at like the shape of it, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I go back and look at the pictures, and that's exactly what it was. Because I was thinking it had to be something mechanical because it was only in these areas, like these big these big squares. And I
And
thought,
also, if it's straight downhill or if it's on an angle, the chips would be directional or whatever. Uh, it reinforces in my mind that there are no absolutes,
yeah,
Dave. In, in
this particular hailstorm was pretty interesting. It
Mhm.
lasted 28 minutes with 2.5 to 3 inch hail,
Wow.
and it wasn't a big wind event,
Hmm.
and the hail just went straight freaking down. And
And
we don't
that's what the structure showed. That's what the trees and everything else showed is straight down. Um,
right.
it, if you work from an appraisal valuation backwards, though, concrete can express ACVs that are extreme. You could have a 50-year-old concrete pad, and
Hmm.
it's 90% depreciated potentially, depending on its condition. So there's no absolutes, but age, makeup, and a lot of experts in doing property assessment. And you line them all up and you say, here's a concrete pad. What PSI are we dealing with here? What what resistance to damage might there be? And no,
I
you
wonder
can't.
what the I wonder what the PSI what's the PSI say in IBC 2016
Yeah,
for a
that.
for a
Yeah,
driveway? Is it 3,000?
yeah, at least 3,000, depending on where you're at. If you're in, yeah, it's because it's also geographical. You might need different PSI if you're in a freeze thaw area for
Yeah.
resistance to that type of work.
Years and years and years and years and years. I mean, many long time ago. I managed construction, and I get this call from this lady one night. Her name's Mary Herring, and she lives in the ninth ward of New Orleans. She's obviously a black lady, and she calls me about 9:30. She says, "I'm sorry I'm calling you so late, but since we're family and all, I need you to come out here to my house." And I said, what you want to do with your house? She says, "I got to see about getting it lifted up so it don't flood anymore." Well, I show up to this house, and the first thing I note is the bricks are like bigger than normal bricks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the house.
This typical shotgun New
This
Orleans
house.
house.
No, this house is completely square.
Okay.
Okay. And then I walk inside the house, and I realize that those bricks are structural.
So it was a masonry house.
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm like, that's interesting. And I mean, the thing about it was as plumb as it could possibly be. I mean, everything after that storm was all wompy jawed, but not that
Yeah.
place. And but she wanted to lift it, so I said, "Well, in order to lift it, you're gonna have to tear up this driveway and this porch right here." And she says, "Yeah." She says, "That's what I need you to do." I said, "Okay, we'll do that." And I give her a number for it, and she says, "Okay, do it." And we send the guys over there to do it. And I get a call that says, "Hey, man, you got to come over here. We've got a problem." And they just couldn't use anything they were using. They couldn't break this concrete. They've been working on it for hours, couldn't break it. And so I called Miss Herring and I said, "Mary, can you tell me how your house is built?" She says, "Yeah, my husband worked for the roads department. He built like a lot of bridges, and he just brought things home and he made our house. And so the kind of concrete she had was the kind they put on bridges."
And he probably filled it with rebar cages and
Yeah, yeah. It took me. It took us. We had we had to order from Sunbelt 3 different things and keep going up in size.
mm-hmm.
And finally got it. We took a bath on it. But but it was just a reminder that, like, and when the guys actually lifted the house, I also know this stuff is much heavier than other concrete. And so when they lifted the house, we had a barbecue out front just to watch it, to see if
Wow.
they could do it. And they did it. They did it, but they said it took like 3 times what they'd normally do
They
to
had to have some pretty stout steel underneath it, and
yeah. And they said that they were surprised they could pull it off, but they were very surprised that they put it in the air didn't make it give any damage whatsoever. And so anyway, but I get your point on concrete. The
I,
thing, like, I've seen in this particular market, that one I just told you about was in Kansas. Okay.
mm-hmm.
Kansas had some righteous hailstorms this last year. And so I'm seeing things in that market that I don't normally see in them. And so it's been interesting to watch it.
I noticed some of the comments that went on your post was immediately went to a discussion of repair methods. And you do a surface repair on a concrete driveway. It's like painting vinyl siding, right? And Kansas, they're going to deal with temperature differences and all that stuff. So ultimately, like all claims, you work from the damage backwards. And is it part of the cause of loss? And then you work on what's the effect, what's the repair method. And for concrete, it's like a vehicle that hits the edge of a ramp and it gets busted off. You can't really fix that. You can cosmetically repair it. But what is the deserving outcome of an insurance policy? What's typical practices, that type of stuff? And I'd say the same thing for this concrete pad.
Yeah, it's direct physical. If it is indeed direct physical
Right.
loss. I had an umpire job a while back. It was for Hurricane Sally, and we walked this entire house. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this entire house inside and out. There's damages. Everybody agrees on it. We go all the way around the house, and then right on the front right-hand corner, there's about a third of a brick that is just missing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay. I said, "So you want the bricks, huh?"
Yeah. Well,
He's
of
like,
course,
he's
a
like,
brick's
"I do."
repairable. It But
I
again, the
do.
brick varieties are
Yeah,
entirely different. There's matching all that other stuff.
yeah. And I
Concrete
said,
pad,
so his well, what his opposing said to him was, we can replace that broken one, and then we can paint the brick, and I'll agree to that. And he said, if you can get the carrier to paint it every 5 years for the next 75, then I'm good to go.
absolutely. Yeah. Or, the siding that gets painted. Will you repaint it every time the temperature changes and the overlaps start to show that? I'm sorry, Dave, I'm going to disappoint you here.
Okay.
We do not work in a rocket science business.
I I
It is
I,
not rocket science.
I agree. I
But
agree.
often we try to make it into that, don't we?
We do. And what bothers me is there are things I run into all the time that I'm not sure of, I'm not comfortable with, or whatever. And I'm going to ask somebody who does. And there's no harm in that. And that keeps us from going down rabbit holes
Hmm.
that are just unhealthy. Um, and let me ask you this, since we're talking about concrete. Is there some certain temperature that it gets to that damages concrete in a fire?
Again, is it a 6-inch concrete wall? Is it an 8-inch? What mix is it? Is it fully reinforced? Is there expansion and contraction? But a really hot, unattended fire, like in a basement, most often will cause expansion cracks that may not be visible for a while till the next temperature change. So if it's a hot contained fire in a basement, most often the surface at least will be damaged to the point where something's got to be done. I mean, really. But seldom do you not see cracks in a concrete foundation affected by a fire where it's been a contained fire for a while. It's
Yeah, I've had I had somebody tell me the other day when the that when you do like block buildings and
mhm.
fire, when when the block turns blue, it has to be replaced. And I thought,
Well, there's
like,
a new one for me.
I'm like, I didn't get, I didn't get that in school.
What
I
what if
can't.
the block's been parged and it hides the blue?
That's what I was thinking. It was just, it was just stupid. Yeah, I don't know. I think what I'm going to do on most of these that I've got that have this damage from the storm is I'm going to invite an expert to come make a decision about it.
Well, that
And
that takes the load off of the two appraisers. If the opposing says, "Yeah, I accept what experts say," but even for an expert, if they have to do destructive testing like coring or such, how does that affect your decision? As soon as you put the hole in it, you know, so you epoxy it or whatever. So you value it, you apply depreciation, and you move along
that's right.
because it's not the biggest part of the loss. If the stones are that high, that big, it's
Yeah.
it's the
The,
part you see first. That's
the,
all.
th- the thing that was interesting about this storm is you've got consistent windows,
Yeah.
and you know people from like the South don't really understand the kind of windows people have in the
Mhm.
Midwest. Like, they have windows that keep the winter out, and they usually have better windows. Like, we'll come to places in the South that'll have just some of the crappiest windows you could ever
Mhm.
see, and they get along just fine
Because it keeps the
because
outside out.
yeah,
That's all.
but you couldn't do that in most of the Midwest.
I'm curious about this one with the concrete.
Hmm.
Were there penetrations in the roof?
The roof is definitely damaged.
I mean, to the point where it's through the decking.
There's some places where it's damaged the decking.
Yeah.
Um, I will say that most of the ones I'm dealing with have, like, those like true 50-year shingles,
Right. The very heavy.
and very impact resistant.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking damage. It's just not the damage. I saw one that was like a 3 tab that was 15 years old, and it looked like somebody took a hammer to the decking,
Yeah.
and that was, but it was just,
Yeah. 50-year thick surface is compressible, whereas a concrete driveway slab is not. And the stone coming down is definitely not. And the speed that it's coming from, I mean, that's the picture you showed. It doesn't look like someone took a ball peen hammer to the driveway or something else. It's just, but you know what? It makes for cool discussions, and I
yeah.
learn things from it.
Well, I like to do. If you think about what I normally do online, is normally what I'm doing is some form of an intervention.
Yeah.
I want you to I want you to basically back into learning is what I want you to
Mm-hmm.
do,
Yeah.
because I think the more we learn together, the better. Like one of the things that I learned just jabbing with people is, like, we can make if we do a brittle test, or repairability test, I should say, a repairability test
Mm-hmm.
on a brand new roof, it can fail. It's a crappy test.
I could tell you if you're in the middle of winter in Buffalo and you do a repairability test on a composition roof, it's going to fail.
Yes, every time.
Yeah.
Every time. I had where are you located?
I'm just north of Buffalo. We just moved.
North.
I'm literally just north of Buffalo.
How cold is it?
Oh, we've had a mild
Yeah.
fall and early winter. Haven't had a flake of snow yet.
Yeah, I was tickled pink. I was just wearing just like a long sleeve shirt in,
Yeah.
in Kansas when I was there last week. It's just,
It's been a strange season.
yeah, it has. I think I think we're going to get pop tour in the next month or so in a
Oh,
big
no
way.
question. Yeah.
It's just not a year if we don't have a good nor'easter.
Yeah. To your point, though, of sharing information, I just started work with a company called MC Consultants. It's all remote consultants of pretty much every trade, specialty, building
Yeah.
consultants, all the deal. But so it's 110 or so consultants across the country. And
Wow.
I'm gratified that there's a tech sharing method that's used when, say, John Doe, the HVAC guy, says, I'm not really sure about this. And you put something out into the email chain and people can contribute. And it's nobody's saying, I know everything. Maybe I'll learn something. And if you're talking HVAC, you say you're talking concrete. Someone who is a steel expert may have seen concrete effects because what does steel attach to? Obviously, concrete. So it's a cool thing that you do because it kind of mirrors getting expertise from, and a street sweeper probably can tell you something about concrete you don't know because that street sweeper's working on concrete every day. He's got a different perspective.
That's true. That is true. That's a really good perspective. There's a company called Catafote Steel in
Mm-hmm.
Texas. They fired most of their upper management and a great portion of their middle management, and went to their line workers and said, "We will not be here in 6 months if we don't do something better.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your hands." And the guys on the line that were doing the steel smithing
Mm-hmm.
in 7 days created a new way to smite steel, which made it stronger than what was coming in from China,
Probably at less cost.
and at less cost, and
Yeah.
their company thrived. And I always think I always think about that. You remember who Tom Peters was, or is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He did me a solid once and sent me out there to see them. And it was when I was doing like my business stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
just it was just cool. But it always made me think, like even with my own crew, like my estimation staff, if we have a problem, I just say, okay, fix it, guys, because those guys from many different perspectives are going to be stronger than me just arbitrarily saying something.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges in an organization is when you inhibit decision making, and people end up with what I call decision constipation because they fear making a decision. And nobody makes all the right decisions. Maybe you do, but I don't.
I don't make all the right decisions.
Right.
I say if I could just mess one more thing up, I'd have a full set.
Yeah. So ultimately, you suggest that empower people, give them some ability to affect their environment, their work environment, and they'll do great stuff, and they'll exceed your expectations.
So what is your in your expert world? What's your favorite things to deal with? Where's your wheelhouse?
Oh, I've always been a customer advocate since I started my work in retail and such. So even now, through doing disaster work with the government, dealing with insurance claims for a long time, dealing with building consultant, at the core of every interaction, there's some property owner who fears the unknown. So if I can help shine a light on an unknown for that person, my client's client, that's
Mm-hmm.
a win to me.
Yeah,
Because
that's
really,
awesome.
even the simplest claim may be wildly vexing for the homeowner because they look at it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I watched this PA one day. It was a couple of years back, and I thought it was the one of the coolest interactions I'd ever seen. He sat down in the kitchen table with his insured after we had finished looking at everything, and I was marking everything up, and I was kind of off in the corner. And he said to this man and wife, he said, "Now, first of all, I need you to understand that you're going through trauma, and if there's stuff between you that's a little bit raw, it's going to get worse."
It's like throwing gasoline on it.
He says, "So you need to stay real close to each other in this
Mhm.
process, and understand that you're both going to have a whole series of bad days." He said, "I'm not going to be able to just snap my finger and get this done,
And that's
but
great advice.
but I know how to do this, and I will finish this, and it just won't be tomorrow. But don't think because you don't have all the answers that the world is ending,
Hmm.
because I'm getting those answers for you. And as fast as I get them is as fast as I'll bring them to you." I just thought the way he talked to them to actually say, "I don't want you to worry about this. I want you to worry about each other first." I just thought that was just the coolest, the coolest way to do it.
Well, it's the
Um,
most human way to help shine a light where there's darkness after a claim. And I don't mean actual darkness, of course, but people don't know what comes next. It's their
hey,
house, it's their property, it's their livelihood, it's their business.
I lost my house on December 3rd of last year,
Right?
and
You know better than most.
and like I've been pretty lucky. Um, I was able to get to the end of my claim in less than a year, which most people don't.
See
And
that is wild.
that's only because I have a lot of people in the industry who could
Yeah.
advise me on good things, And well, the other side of that is I do think that when I dealt with I do think I have a different way of dealing with the carrier too. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think the carrier is my enemy, and a lot of people mistake the carrier for your enemy.
Well, you can easily put yourself in the adjuster's shoes because you've been in the business so long and you've seen so much that's come up.
Well, I feel sorry for the desk adjusters, to be honest with you,
No.
because what they've done is, and the insurance industry knows that this does not work. Okay, they know
Hmm.
it. They know if they want to have happy claims, they need to let adjusters adjust. Okay, but they've chosen not to do that. That is fact, and they've taken it to the desk adjuster, and the desk adjuster is nothing more than an evangelist. They just take whatever that you've got, grade it for triage it, and then take it upstairs. And if I treat that person like I understand their role
Hmm.
and appreciate what they're doing to try to advocate for me, it pivots me away from what's wrong with you. Why won't you get this for me? We talked about this 3 weeks ago.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of things in our industry could get a lot better if we just treated people like humans first.
Yeah, and of course the appraisal business has accelerated every year for the last 5 to 10 years. Partially due to the knowledge that the adjusting staff has. Desk adjusters are usually out of college, couple years, whatever. But even working with other appraisers, I don't need to win in this appraisal. I don't need to win. All right.
There's only one way to win, and that is to get the appropriate amount of the loss.
Correct.
That's the only way you win. I think that you can lose an appraisal, but you can't really win.
No, but a lot of people go into it with that mindset. I was on the call with a carrier claim vice president a couple of weeks ago, and this was an appraisal in the city of New York. And I was working for the carrier, of course, and the valuation we came to was nowhere near what their independent adjuster had, and the manager was screaming. And at that point, you can't explain why you got to where you got. It was a very amicable outcome with the insurance appraiser. We met on site. It was clear to me how it would go. And I never worry about the money. Always focus on the scope, repair method, and the money always works out. You can't help but do it. But there's still some of the old school out there where there has to be a win.
Well, exactly. I one time I said something online about I had my opposing appraiser had not been able to get back to me. He was a building consultant, and his time is spec'd by someone else, and he was way behind. And after going through this several months and he couldn't send me a position, I just sent him a text. And I said, hey, I know you're busy. And I said, what could we do to shut this down a little faster? And he says, what's your number? I said 11.7. And he says, can you massage it and get it to 10.4? And then I'll sign it. And just send me an award and I'll sign it. And I said, yeah, that's great. Okay. I mentioned this online, and the first thing some people who do training and appraisal said to me was, you did your client wrong because you cut it by almost $1 million. And no, what he forced me to do was to figure out how I could get there with a lower budget, where the efficiencies weren't in my position. And I did that. And that's the only reason I could get there.
What if it was moving from 110,000 to 100,000, 10%, or even say 95? They would not have the same resistance to that because the magnitude of the dollars, but it's still only 10% or 15%, right, whatever. That's what people don't get. We get caught up in the magnitude of the numbers. But
yeah, the biggest problem I've had lately is I have a contractor, and this is usually something on exterior mostly. I have a contractor who's replaced the roof, replaced the siding, replaced the windows.
Got incurred costs.
And this is the number. And they come in at like 60% of the number. I said, but they already incurred all this cost. And then they come back and say, well, that's because they had O&P in that. And they shouldn't have had O&P. And I'm trying to explain to people lately that
I saw your posts.
Well, O&P is not about complexity. There is no definition outside of the insurance world where overhead and profit has anything to do with complexity. It has to do with taking on the risk of that job, financially, labor, materials, screw ups, whatever.
A recognition that there has to be a profit to carry the business forward. You remember MSB 15 years ago? They had O&P that was variable depending on the geography. So if you're writing an estimate in Manhattan, the overhead and profit percent they allowed was like 42%. Because of those, I don't want to say unexpected, the accelerated costs of doing business in New York City.
And I do the same thing on my estimates to this day, is because, I had a loss in Soho, and, my supervision cost is so much denser there because
How
I
about the fact
gotta
you can't
because
get
I
on
gotta
the
go to the police to get and pay them and get a permit to get a delivery show up, and I got to do it every other day.
that's if you can get access to the service elevator
Right.
in time other than 11 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah.
Right. And it's just probably one of the largest arguments I ever had in Manhattan was or in Soho. It was actually in Soho. They they had this fire and it damaged the top of the oh crud the top of the stairs, and they were
Hmm.
they weren't metal, they were wood stairs that had been there since the late 1800s. And I said we have to replace it with something that kind of looks like it, but it can't be wood. It's the key form of egress from the building,
Hmm.
and it has to be replaced because it's damaged. And they've it could stay as long as it stayed, but once it got damaged, it has to. And and they fought us for 3 solid years because they were trying to say that we had to do it on 1925 code.
1925 code was like 3 pages.
Yeah,
The whole bill.
exactly. Put locks on doors.
Yeah.
you know, you know, stuff like that. It's crazy. But I mean, I just think I do think this though is I think in some ways the industry is doing better because I think that when you put pressure on something,
Hmm.
they often grow. Okay. And so I watch a lot of people in the industry with much deeper knowledge of things that they deal with, much deeper. And I just think that's I think that's really good. It doesn't mean that if we get somebody we're talking to on the other side that doesn't have that, that it's going
Hmm.
to go well.
Well, in
I
aggregate, the knowledge, I say the knowledge in the industry is much greater in aggregate. Few people can know everything. There's some that say they do, but the access to more information is bigger now than it ever was because you can access building codes in 50 states, probably 1,000 jurisdictions at a few clicks of your mouse.
right, right. I mean, we use like up codes in my business, so
Yep.
we can figure out the codes.
If you
I
had to
had
do that 10 years ago, you're calling the code enforcement guy who's out for 3 days and you're not going to get a hold of it. So
do,
yeah,
do,
in aggregate, I think the knowledge volume is much higher.
you know what I've told people to do with permitting, the building department that people don't
Mhm.
normally do is it's the same exact thing I did on my house. I went to the building department and I said, I need you to come tell me what I have to do to get a certificate of occupancy when I'm done. I said, I don't need a letter from you. I just need you to talk me through what you need based on my house. And would you do that? And they sent that guy over and he said, you got something to write with? And he just literally just listed off what he was going to require. And then, I have his card and his email address and all that.
And
And
you can just hand those notes off to your architect, who
yeah,
probably can confirm all of them just by sight, based on
right.
what's said. Probably adds a few that the code enforcement guy walked past. So you're right. It's in aggregate the amount of
Well,
information
yeah.
is.
And I don't think that people realize that that they have the ability to ask that question
Yeah.
because they all think, I want to get that guy to write a letter that says X. Nope, not going to do it. But they'll tell you what they require because that's the framework in which they think.
Hmm.
And I've been able to work out a lot of claim problems just with that right there. Um, I worked out a 2-year problem in Orlando once by just getting the guy from the building department to show up to a meeting.
Yeah, that's great.
And he just goes, what are you fighting about?
Well, everybody wants to be recognized for what they know, even if
Right.
it's not. It can be subtle, but people just want to know that that they're demanded. But concrete wise, I think it's a cool question. I don't think there's any question based on your picture that the concrete was damaged by hailstones, just on the random nature of the damage. And we have to be open to the variability of the materials and the sites and all that stuff. And
Yeah. It's like I say when I'm an umpire. I don't have to like your repair.
mhm.
I don't have to feel good about it. I just have to know it's right. And sometimes I have to award things that I don't want to award because I don't feel good about them. But somebody did the science right,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody proved their point properly. And I don't have the option in my work. I don't think any of us do. I think some people take it, but I don't think I have the option in my work to, once something's validated, I need to go that way. I get to, in January, I get to have this discussion in a big way. I have an appraisal, and we had an engineer who said in the engineer report, here's a list of sliders. Here's a list of sliders. And these sliders had water damage around them, and the sliders need further testing. So we went and tested all of those, and the engineer was dead on balls right. We tested them, not peeked at them, decided they were damaged or not, but did that. My opposing appraiser brought a window company in, and they walked around and looked at windows and said there was no damage. It's and what I told the umpire was, they said, well, we want our expert to come to the appraisal. I'm like, no. I said, you didn't understand the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't get to arbitrarily say that this guy has go magic eyes. He doesn't. Like, when we tested him, we used a system that doesn't, it will not allow us to alter it.
Mm-hmm.
It runs automatically and then and records automatically. We just have to tell it what window you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's not a big deal to a lot of people, but
well, it is the fenestration aspect, because there's a lot of square footage on the exterior of a house that is doors and windows.
Yeah.
And
in this case, on this particular loss, there's a little over $1.8 million worth of fenestration, which is the reason why I'm getting the hard no. That's the truth.
If it was one window, you wouldn't be getting the pushback. Wow. And
No.
was this a wind type of claim?
Yeah, it's a hurricane.
So a hurricane, and it's like having a big thunderstorm and you got a flat roof, and the rain comes 3 inches in an hour. And the weight of the rain falling on that roof causes things to happen that you won't see after the rain is gone. But the effect is there because the weight. Same in a windstorm.
Yeah, I had a loss years ago in South Carolina. It was a manufacturing facility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the building looked like like 3 football fields put together,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a collapse
Mm.
during a rainstorm. And the engineer, who was a local engineer, had 2 years before written a paper about the effects of whiteout rain.
Yeah.
And he did the calculations of how much weight was put on that roof in like less than 30 minutes. And that it was so seismically large from a weight
Mm-hmm.
perspective that it just caused part of that roof to just fail. And I never had it explained to me like that. But
well, if you lived in Buffalo, New York, I could explain it to you when the rain falls as frozen precipitation and there's 5 feet of snow on a roof, and they can prove 10 inches of snow is an inch or an inch and a half of liquid water content. And we get a lot of residential roofs or commercial roofs that have failures because of that. And that's the same thing. People don't think about it when it's liquid rain because it comes and goes. But the weight, 3 inches of rain on a roof is huge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I tried to explain that to somebody one day. So I brought a 5-gallon jug that I use for my water.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought it to an umpire meeting, and I said, hold this. The guy goes, I said, just keep holding it. He says, it's really heavy. I'm like, yeah, it's 5 gallons. I mean, that's just 5. And what I explained to him was that they had 1,100 gallons of water that released into the structure.
Wow. Then you get plug drains. You get scuppers that may not even be in place because the territory, the geography doesn't need scuppers and offsets. But Dave, I got to move along, man. We could talk for hours.
Yeah, I got to get going too. I got some stuff I got to get out before the morning comes. But it's good to talk to you, and I really like your perspective.
Yeah.
And let's do it again, okay?
Yeah, someday we'll be able to work together on something if it comes up that way.
Oh, it will. You know, if everything happened right, I might wind up being your neighbor
Nothing wrong with that.
because you know things are sometimes a little crazy in Florida.
Well,
That's why
work safe. Yeah,
I
oh
spend
no,
most of my time everywhere else for that reason.
I feel your pain. We considered relocating to Florida at one time, but I'm staying put right here in the demon that I know, as opposed to the demon I don't.
I do understand that.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason I'm still in Florida, but I
Work
don't know.
safe. Walk those
Yep,
roofs carefully and
I
stay
do.
off the tile roofs. I don't care how clever you are.
That's
David,
right.
be well. An
Take care.
absolute pleasure.
Peace, brother.
Likewise.